Hi, Jim Jordan here, speaking to you from Ashland, Oregon, March 14th, 2013. And today I want to do a little talk more along the lines of a citizen's legal education, what I've been starting to do more speaking about on YouTube. For those of you who know, I'm in the healthcare field, but I was a lawyer some years ago, and I left law to get into health and natural healing. But the law is something we always have to be aware of for everybody. And think it's really important that citizens, that our neighbors, that we're all aware of the role of law in our lives. And last week, there was a big thing in Congress. Rand Paul did a 13-hour filibuster to basically get the Obama administration to state clearly that it won't use drones to assassinate American citizens on American soil without due process. So that brought up this whole thing about the role of government and checks and balances on the executive branch by the legislative branch, and etc. So what I want to talk to you about today is sort of a basic, some concepts about how our system of government was designed and why I think we have to really keep that in mind and make sure that it stays applicable today, and we don't get carried away and let one branch of government or one level of government, in this case the federal government, have too much power. So the founding fathers knew, Jefferson, Washington, Madison, Franklin, all these guys, they knew that power was corruptible. It actually attracted people often who could be corrupted, and of course we've got a lot of corruption in government and corporations that pretty much run, can influence disproportionately legislation. So our system was designed with multiple checks and balances. So first of all, we have three basic levels of government. We have the federal government, we have state governments, and then we have local governments. So generally speaking, we have these local governments, could be county governments, municipal governments. But let's talk about for now, we'll talk about state and federal government. And within each of these levels of government, we have an executive, a president, and governors, in the case of states, a legislative branch, the Congress and the state legislatures, and judicial branch. So these are all designed to check each other. So if Congress passes a law, the president can veto it. He won't sign it. It won't be law unless, so in a sense, he has the president can nullify or check a law passed by Congress. Now Congress can sort of nullify that nullification by overriding the veto with 2/3 vote. Now if the president signs the bill and the Supreme Court, federal courts decide, and the Supreme Court ultimately decides it's unconstitutional, it basically makes that law null and void even though Congress passed it and the president signed it. So these checks are designed to make sure that there's basically some security that the law will be followed. The Constitution is the highest law in the land, and it's basically the responsibility of each branch, Congress, executive, judicial, to make sure laws comply with the Constitution. Okay, so it's not just the Supreme Court's role. Congress should be thinking about whether the laws are passing are violating the rights of citizens, the Bill of Rights, or if it's a power within their delegated powers. Of course, this doesn't happen very often. The Congress and President often work together to get certain things passed that benefits, let's say it's the bailout of the Wall Street banks, or health care for the country, or a defense budget that includes billions and billions of dollars for overseas wars. They often coordinate, of course, and interestingly often the courts don't really check federal government actions. So what can the people do when the federal government and all three branches pretty much are in alignment with a increasing concentration of power in the federal government, and which includes whatever they're doling out of corporate welfare, or underwriting certain businesses and promoting wars overseas. If that is the final say, and they all agree on this, Congress, which is basically almost you're incapable of voting out anybody in Congress because of the way the electoral system is set up. Periodically you can, but it's not easy. what can the people do? So these are within the federal government. There's horizontal checks within that level: the veto power, the override power, and the Supreme Court constitutionality. And Congress can actually limit the federal courts too by passing rules and regulations and laws that affect jurisdiction and lower levels of the federal courts. So there's these multiple checks on this horizontal level, but at what point do the states get involved? And do the states get involved? Do the people have any say beyond their voting a Democrat or Republican in? So that's an interesting question. I've had this dialogue with quite a few people, and I'm convinced, and throughout history there have been cases where states really have a way to vertically check the federal government. Since the states created the federal government, it's a creation of the states, which were the initial sovereign institution in the colonies. They actually are the creator of it, so they can also affect their created object. And of course, the people create their own states too. The people decided to create governments and local governments and state governments. So the people are the ultimate source of power, ultimate authority. So the states can do what is called, they can pass laws that nullify federal laws or illegal actions, however you want to look at it, and refuse to enforce those in their state. Historically, this was done, the War of 1812 with the British. The New England states refused to comply with the draft. They refused to support the war. The northern states refused to enforce the Fugitive Slave Act that the federal government had passed. So they, instead of returning runaway slaves to the South, they let them stay. So contrary to what many people think, nullification was used to fight against slavery, not in favor of slavery. And in current times, there's many movements, whether it's the indefinite detention provision of NDAA, states are nullifying, or Second Amendment protection legislation being passed to preempt the federal government from abridging the right to bear arms of the citizens of the states, or medical marijuana laws. So this vertical nullification was recognized by the founding fathers. Jefferson and Madison wrote about it as a way to check the federal government when it does not, collectively at all three branches, does not follow the law. So that's just something I wanted to put out to you today for consideration and discussion, and I'll be having more videos down the road. I'm Jim Jordan, and I hope to be speaking to you again down the road.